Hi. Many of you will be waking up or acclimating or activating to your true identity very soon, if you're not already in the beginnings of doing that. So it's now time for me to share with you who I really fully am. In this lifetime, my name is Kelly, and my spiritual name is Earthsong Lovecraft. But I am of the bloodline of David and Solomon and Jesus. I'm of the bloodline of Shem and the days of Samson and the tribe of Dan. My lineage, my bloodline, goes all the way back to the days of Atlantis, with Atlas as my father and Poseidon as my grandfather. My name then was Asherah. So let me begin with telling you how I heard the call to come to Earth, to incarnate here once again, to help humanity to evolve in collective consciousness and to choose the higher road rather than the road more often traveled that would lead to cataclysm and catastrophe. There's a lot of details behind that, but that's the short version. Today I want to let you know about me. So from early childhood to a young adult, I was taught and practiced various martial arts, fencing, boxing, combative defensive moves, knife throwing, archery, gun practice, various philosophies, theosophies, and the Native American ways of living off the land, with the land, in harmony with nature. I also worked in the astral, clearing energy, and was trained by beings of glowing, beautiful, golden white light. A lot what you would compare to the beings in the movie Cocoon from the 80s, if any of you ever saw that. They very much look like that. And what I call the tall whites, which don't match really so much with what other people are describing as tall whites. From my 20s until my 40s, I learned herbs by identification, their uses, their applications, their dangers, their compositional makeup. I learned survival skills. I learned lost trades. I learned world religions, world mythologies. And also at that time is when I was certified in world ministry for learning these world religions. Since 2018, I have publicly given psychic guidance, connected people with their past loved ones, done regressions for past life, healing, and recall. I have remote viewed. I have helped resolve a few police cases with missing persons or cases that they couldn't understand what happened in the event of a death. I have healed knee injuries, broken bones, failing hearts. I have stopped heart attacks from happening. I have eliminated migraines from people, released emotional traumas, aligned chakras, and yes, even resurrected the dead. Not once, but a few times. On one particular occasion, I resurrected 41 lives at once, baby chickens. And I had my then 9-year-old child assist me with what she had been learning because she was an apprentice of mine for energy movement and energy manipulation for healing. So I had her help me with what she had learned that to that point, and she did very well, helping me to resurrect those 41 baby chickens that had drowned to death outside in a rainstorm while we were gone. And if you would like, you could look back in my videos and find that story. I told that story about three and a half years ago. I'm also the one that was in the members meetings with the crew of Skinwalker Ranch that told Travis Taylor to use the 1.6 hertz to activate the wormhole frequency and open it up so that they could see the UFOs. And 2 weeks later, they actually aired the episode where they tried that and it worked. And I'm the one that told them to do that. And I have witnesses to that as well. I also have documented proof of resurrecting my I have 7 children. One of my children at the age of 10 and a half died in a car wreck with my mother. And I resurrected her in front of the doctor and the team of nurses that were in the room where they took me to tell her goodbye. And instead of telling her goodbye, I dropped to my knees and screamed out loud and said, "God, tell me what to do. You can't take her." And very clearly I heard the voice of God say, "You know exactly what to do, but you have to have zero doubt." And at that point I had already resurrected the 41 baby chickens, like 3 cats, 2 dogs, things like that. Animals. I'd resurrected animals that had just freshly been dead. And it worked because I had absolute zero doubt. I also was supposed to have been on the Travel Channel as the pilot episode and the first 3 succeeding episodes that Jack Osborne and Peter somebody was going to do in 2019, but then COVID happened and so it got canceled. I have personally met one of the Bin Laden brothers. I've also met several famous people in my life because of who my dad was. I've met the Clintons on multiple occasions, and I'm not proud to say that. I've met John Wayne. I've met many famous people. The older famous people. Fats Domino, Mickey Gilley, Glenn Campbell, Jerry Lewis, dang it, his name escapes me, Bud or Buddy, somebody from the Hee Haw show. I can't think of what his name. I met him and another man, both from the Hee Haw show. Many. I've met many. Ronald Reagan. I met Ronald Reagan before he was a president. When he used to hang out with John Wayne. Him and John Wayne were good friends. And my dad knew John. So I met Reagan before he was ever a president. So this is going to be my short version of my story to sort of give you some timelines and some ideas um, of what kind of things I've experienced, been through, or have learned that I can do. And if any of this calls to you as truth and feels familiar to you, resonates with you in your core as something you may have also experienced, then you are one of us that have volunteered to be here. Personally, I like to call us Earth Angels because we are here to help humanity. Others would like to call us by other names, like starseeds, or volunteers, or indigo children, or even perhaps Pleiadian or Arcturian. Whatever word and language you use is fine, because they're really all of the same, in my opinion. So, a little bit of a timeline. As a child, I was part of the GATE program, GATE, which was a program for the gifted and talented education of gifted and talented children. That's what it stood for, was gifted and talented education. So I was part of the GATE program, and so was my uh, brother, who's the closest in age to me. I'm the youngest of 7, and he was 3.5 years older than me. And we were both in the GATE program. We both experienced the training that I listed at the beginning of the video, with the martial arts and the fencing. I mean, we would practice together. We would duel together, to be very good at those things. We also were taken aboard a spaceship that was a learning center for children, and we were taught how to levitate things and use telekinesis. We were taught how to interface with a computer with only our mind, with telepathic control and thought control. We were taught how to levitate our bodies, like that game you play as a kid, light as a feather, stiff as a board. What else? We were taught to understand sacred geometry and sound resonance. We were taught about resonances and how they can heal and create and move objects. They can make objects do different things. Like some sound can make things just levitate, and then other sounds can actually make it physically move where you want to put it. So we were taught things like that. And then as we got older, we worked together without being taken here on the earthly plane, connecting our energy and our focus together to make power lines jump and wave like a jump rope, or like waves in the ocean. We've created vortexes from power lines that we watched spin and skip through the field and over the hills. We've moved clouds. We've called in rain. We've parted tornadoes to keep them from destroying an area or harming people. We have calmed hurricanes together. We have dispersed and distributed the earthquake energy so that the earthquakes weren't as intense to create a tsunami. Many things are possible. And we aren't able to do those things because we're anybody special. On the contrary, we had to learn them first in order to teach you how to regain your own God-given abilities, because we are all born with these abilities. All of us have these abilities. And this is why I say that from the age of 3, and I've been old enough to articulate it, I have always said that I'm here to finish Jesus' true message for this time that we would have in my late 40s that we would come to know as the Great Awakening, which did begin in my late 40s with 2019 and COVID. Many, many people began to wake up then. And that is when the world had to stop and give everybody time to actually be able to look inward, which I did not understand how God was ever going to get everybody to be still long enough to awaken until COVID happened. And then I totally got it. He allowed that to go ahead and happen as part of the plan for the good team, even though the nefarious ones have been trying to thwart our Great Awakening every which way they can. And even with several recent events, they didn't stop the awakening. They only lit more lights and beacons, which is wonderful. So okay, over here on this side. So at the age of 3, I had a knowing of the Great Awakening that would happen in my late 40s. I was told that we are who we've been waiting for, not some individual savior, that Christ consciousness coming back into us allowing Christ consciousness to be in us is how the second coming of Christ happens, and that is the true resurrection that is spoken of in Revelations, when the dead in my name will arise, because all of the people that had turned their back to God or walked away from God are going to be the ones to come back first. And then once that happens, the rest of the world that already believed in Christ will fully activate and allow Christ fully into their being. And that in turn is what creates the Christ consciousness field that we need to blanket the planet. And this is already literally in action as we speak in the past 11 days, in full force. That the world as we know it is about to change, which is happening in real time as well, because of all of us lighting our beacons and blanketing the earth with our light. The world is changing for the better, rather than all our alternative, which would have been taking that road more traveled, which would have led us to chaos and destruction and cataclysm and basically like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome scenario that would not have been good. That I'm here to finish Jesus' message, and that I remember that in this lifetime, the last lifetime that I just left to come here, that I came from a place called Taygeta, and it wasn't until many years later in life that I understood that inside of the Seven Sisters, the Pleiadian constellation, there is a star named Taygeta. So this is the star system that I come from, and I was thinking that it must be a planet named Taygeta, but it's actually a star system. And that my original father here's name is Atlas, and my grandfather's name was Poseidon. I have had experiences with men in black, tall white, albino looking type of white beings that have red eyes. I have had interactions with small beings the size of a toddler that also have red eyes and like a triangle in the middle of their chest that glows. I met an angelic Pleiadian being that would have been probably the age of 18 or 19, 20 years old when I met her, when I was only 7, and her name was Alanis. The man that piloted the ship that she came in, that they took me aboard of, was a tall, very tall, blue-skinned man with a very long neck, and his head looked very similar to what you could only relate to a giraffe, is the closest thing that his head was shaped like, and his name was Zufu. He was the pilot. Now, some people have told me that he could be Arcturian, and others have told me that he could be Vulcan, and I have no clue either way. I never knew really where he came from. I just knew that he looked very different. Um, by the time I was 4 and 5 and 6 years old, I could see dead people. I could hear people's thoughts. I could scan their body and tell them what was wrong with them physically, health wise. Um, my brother and I typically would get taken together, and we always shared a bed. And the bed would always vibrate um, very quick and ferociously as we're being broken down to be taken, because your molecular level, your molecular vibration has to change in order to be taken through the ceiling and the walls and stuff. And we could always feel the bed shaking, and we would actually argue back and forth. Quit making the bed shake. I'm not doing it. Yes, you are. We would go back and forth, and the next thing you know, we're gone, and we're on board the ship. By the age of 9, my family was taking us on a history lesson type field trip the next day, and I visited in the astral the night before. It was actually Gettysburg, the Civil War tour that my dad was taking us to. And when we got there, I could tell him every single detail of the whole place. As we went through the tour, I would tell him ahead of time what we were going to see next. And then on the battlefield, I was telling him about the soldiers that I was seeing dressed in the grays or the blues, and what they looked like, their wounds and their guns, their muskets, all that stuff. I could see it. And so that was when my dad was 100% convinced that I do have these gifts and that I am communicating with something, at least. And my dad, having the background he had, then became very interested in questioning me about it. My brother never spoke up. Like, his lips were sealed. He never said a peep about anything that he was experiencing to them. He would talk to me in private about it. He and I had our own language, just like twins do, where we would communicate with each other in code, and we would speak about this all the time. But he never shared with our parents, that he was experiencing these things too, because he was afraid of what they would think or what they would say. And of course, my mother thought I was absolutely silly and crazy, and had one hell of an imagination. By the age of 16, I had astral travels to the Grand Canyon and was able to describe exactly what the Grand Canyon looks like, and told my father that there were Egyptian artifacts there that at the time no one knew were there yet. It wasn't until the late 80s, I think, that anybody really started talking about that in the public, even though it was something that happened in the late 1800s or something like that, where it was discovered, because it went totally quiet and the Smithsonian shut it up. But around the 80s or somewhere, Time magazine or something wrote an article about it. I forget how my dad learned about it, but he brought it to my attention that there actually are artifacts there. By the age of 18, I was having recall of abductions with my then, at the time, boyfriend, but became my first husband and the father of my first few children. He and I were both abducted together. He and I both also saw a Bigfoot up close, 3 feet away from us. together, and my mother was there as well. She also saw it. Um, so I've had a lot of very weird experiences, that bizarre experiences that most people just don't even have one of in a lifetime. Um, when I was almost 18, my father passed away, and on his deathbed, he told me that if his calculations were correct, he would be back with me in about 10 years. Um, and then, of course, I had my fourth child in 1999, and by the time she was about 3 years old, she comes running down the hallway, jumps in my lap, throws her little tiny hands on each side of my face, beams this beautiful beam of light and a smile, tells me that she used to be my father, and I used to sit on her lap just like this, and she throws her arms around my neck and just squeezed me as tight as she could, thrilled out of her mind with joy. Like my dad, finally did it, and he was able to tell me he did it. I had never even thought about my dad telling me that after he passed away until that day that she said that to me. And it floored me so bad that I actually put her down and made her go away and play so that I could freak out in private, because it really rattled me to my core. But I mean, she did start showing me, she started telling me about boat knots and nautical miles and all kinds of things that my dad would have known, that there's no way that this child at the age of 3 or 4 would know. So she definitely is my father reincarnated, but that doesn't mean that she's my father now. She's very much her own person and on her own soul journey to help me to grow, but also to help her own soul to grow, which is my father's soul as well. But it's an integration and a growth and a learning process. And we honor that, we respect that. By the time I was 18, I had my first child, and on the delivery table, we both were dying, and a blue light came into the room and saved both of us. And this too was documented by nurses that were there, and described as a very scary paranormal event to them. And I personally believe that it was the angelic beings that came to save us, because we both still had a mission. She's the one that I also resurrected at the age of 10 and a half. 10 and a half years later, I brought her back to life. By the time I was 21, I had full recall every single time that I was taken, as well as my brother. He was starting to remember every single experience at that point as well. And that was usually by the triangle craft, if anybody is curious to know. Okay, so the daughter I was just talking about that is actually my dad's soul reincarnated. When I decided to try for another child, I was on a birth control shot that you take every 3 months. And when it came time to take the shot again, I just decided not to take it. My doctor said that's fine, but it's probably going to be up to a year before your cycle balances out and all that stuff. And I was literally pregnant within 2 weeks. And I was actually pregnant with triplets. And this again happened after the orb of light came through the trees and took me. And to me, it looked like a giant reddish orange ball of plasma, like the sun, that came. And it took me, and then I was pregnant immediately. And I was pregnant with the triplets. And there was this whole big thing with that, because for 6 months, the doctors kept saying that none of these babies were in my womb where they belong, that they're all just floating around in my abdomen, willy-nilly, wherever, and that they're not going to survive, and I'm not going to survive, and I need to have an abortion, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm staunchly against abortions, so I was absolutely not going to do that, even if it took my own life. I was not going to have an abortion. And I literally dropped to my knees one night and prayed. and said, please, God, if I can only just have one, I will surrender and be satisfied and grateful with only having one. Please just put at least one in my uterus where it belongs so that they're not trying to take my babies. And again, an orb came through the trees. This time it was a white orb, much smaller, the size of a softball or a soccer ball. Not a softball, a soccer ball. Came through the trees into the window. I don't remember what happened after that. All I know is I woke up the next morning, still in the same place in the living room. Realized I was going to be late for my doctor's appointment. Rushed out the door. They did the ultrasounds. They sent me to the hospital. It was a whole big thing, because they couldn't find but one baby and they didn't know what had happened. So they were tripping. They did, like, I don't even know, 10 or 12 internal ultrasounds on me that day, trying to figure out what was going on. They were looking literally all over around inside my body cavity, around my organs, trying to figure out where these babies went. Because I'm 6 months pregnant, mind you. And finally they were like, ma'am, we don't know what to tell you. There's one baby in the uterus where it should be, and the other two are just gone. We don't know where they went. They're just gone. So I think the angelic beings took them and put the one there the right way, and that one just happened to be the one that the soul of my dad was in. So I guess it worked out the way it was supposed to. And then in 2003, that child, she had never been told. She was born healthy, everything was fine, it was great. She had never ever been told anything about the other two babies, ever. But in 2003, which would have made her almost 4 years old, she comes to me one morning when she wakes up and she tells me that her twins had been there to visit her and that they wanted her to go with them to play, but she was afraid that if I woke up and saw her gone, it would scare me. So she told them they should just stay there and play with her, which, thank God, she was smart enough to say that at the age of 4, because I absolutely would have freaked out if she was gone. And who knows, maybe they wouldn't have brought her back. I don't know. I mean, they always bring me back, so I guess they would have. But, there's still that fear. Anyway, I asked her if she could tell me what they look like. She said they looked exactly like her. They even had little nightgowns on, similar to what she would like to wear. And then I said, how did they get there and how did they leave? And I said, can you draw me a picture? I gave her a crayon. She drew me a picture of a traditional saucer-shaped craft with a whole bunch of windows around the outside of it. So, like, this is my life. One experience after another. By 2000, and my children, mind you, my children did not know about who I am and my experiences, because I was always told to not tell anybody. By the beings and by my father, I was always told, don't tell people who you are or what you can do, because they'll take you away. So I never told anybody, and I didn't share this with my children until much later in their childhood, where they could be old enough to comprehend it. As a matter of fact, my first 5 were all teenage-ish before they knew anything about who I am and what I can do and where I'm from and stuff. And they too have all had these experiences, which I will get to. But by 2007, between 2007 and 2009, is when the big experiences started happening that my children were witnessing. I had to tell them about it because they were witnessing these things too with me. My husband at the time, their father, was also witnessing these things with us. Even if we went camping, I literally could not go anywhere that there wouldn't be some type of a UFO craft that would show up. So In total, in 2007, I had 31 sightings in that first year. And in total, between 2007 and 2009, I saw 7 different types of crafts. There were the chevron shaped, 2 different types of triangle shapes, the circular saucer shape, a diamond shaped one, a blimp shaped one, a smaller one that is more like what people call the tic tac, but I would have called it an egg personally. I would have said an egg. And then also the orbs that look like plasma energy. So I joined MUFON from 2007 until 2011. I was at first just a member of MUFON, and then I became an investigator for my state. I knew Bigelow, and I didn't trust him then either. I don't trust him now, and I didn't trust him then, just because of what he did to the members of MUFON. He bought MUFON so that he could have our information, but he didn't want us. He banned us and barred us, and the only way we could be in as a member at that point was to pay several hundreds of dollars to become a member and be able to still claim our own intellectual property. So instead of that happening before he could bar us out, lock us out, we bleached the whole system of everything of our archives. So in 2010 and 2011, I was part of a scientific research study program that was a blind study done between abductees and people that just thought they saw a UFO that didn't claim being taken. So they were one group, and then the abductees were the other group. And this study was ran by Opus, but George Norrie was involved in it from Coast to Coast AM. MUFON was involved, but Opus and Lester Velez was the top dogs on it. And then there were 2 scientists at Los Alamos who conducted the research program, which took a span of about 10 or 11 months total to complete. We began with psychological profiling, make sure no crazies were in the bunch first and everybody was sane. And then we did several other rigorous things, we had to do physical tests, mental tests, emotional tests, psychological tests. And then we went into symptoms, abilities, experiences, and what they really wanted to know was how many people had a message, because the whole point of the study really was to try to find what we call the starseeds, or the volunteers. The government had a very deep interest in where we were, who we were, was this real, all of that. And naively, we gave them all the information they needed, hook, line, and sinker. And then after the study was over, both of the scientists who had worked on this, once they came to their conclusions and typed out all their findings, which I still have my copies of. There's probably 12 pages of results. Both of them died within 2 weeks. One of a massive heart attack at work in the lab in Los Alamos, and the second one, a week and a half later, he was T-boned in the driver's side of his car and killed instantly. So that was also quite troubling for all of us in the group who stayed in contact. We were MUFON members, all of us that were in the study on the abductee side, and we stayed in contact for years after we left MUFON. We had an underground web spot that we would meet to talk and communicate. what else? I've also talked to um, the time traveler. I'm trying to think of his name. His name escapes me at the moment too. Um, I'll come back to it. I'm starting to get tired now. What else? Okay, so after the MUFON study, right? The Opus MUFON study. Um, very extraordinarily strange things began to happen. My phone was tapped. There was heavy surveillance put on my home. My home was broken into. My laptop and my computer were both messed with. My motherboard and my computer was tracked. The house was tossed a few times, mainly in areas where we would keep books and files. Um, Choppers overhead at night while we sat outside. Those totally quiet choppers would come right over top of us, and we wouldn't even know they're there until they're literally right above us in the tree line. Um, One even played chicken with me in my car on the highway at one time. Um, the phone was tapped. I was followed. Lots of things. Even when I moved to try to get away from it, I was still followed, and my phone was tapped, and I had heavy surveillance. Um, so I went underground. For a long time, I went totally dark on the web. I stopped using my handle that I used at that time. I've still not used it since. Um, but for anybody that wants to know, my name was Citizen K. And I totally quit using it. I totally dropped any kind of credit. I just went ghost. Absolute ghost. For the next, I don't even know, 7 years. I think I was a ghost for 7 years. Um, and then when I did resurface back into the World Wide Web, um, I started speaking and talking about the things I know and who we are and how to free you. And I was immediately approached via the internet. I was immediately approached by a member of the Emerald Order of the Melchizedek, and they said, "You're one of us, and you need this." And he gave me a PDF, and the PDF that he gave me is like instructions, basically, for the same stuff I was already telling people that they could do. So basically, he gave me a handbook to help me teach. So I became a member of the Emerald Order of the Melchizedek, which are of the bloodline of Jesus. And only people who prove that they have this knowledge also prove that they're of the bloodline and that they are one of the true volunteers. So that happened then. I think that was around 2017, I guess. By February of 2019, I was warned that something was coming, but that it wouldn't be what they say it is, and to stand firm on the foundation of faith and do not believe what I am seeing or hearing in the news or from people, that it isn't the truth, it isn't as bad as they're going to try to make it be, that everything's going to be okay, and to trust God's plan, that all of us, my family, got very sick immediately after that. And I had my husband take me to the urgent care center. And at the urgent care center, we had the most bizarre thing happen because the doctors, or the receptionist lady there, told me that I can't be who I claim to be because that person was already there 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, no, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. And I had to prove to them that my name really was my name, that my social security number really was my social security number, that my date of birth really was my date of birth. Like I had to give them credentials to prove who I was, and they were still just puzzled and mind blown and couldn't figure out how this very same person with all of this very same exact identity, and she had blonde hair, was there 2 weeks ago and had already been treated for some type of anomalous flu. What? I never did get to the bottom of that one. I don't know if we had a timeline switch or what. I don't know what that was. But I've had paranormal, poltergeist, and weird shit like that happen my whole life. At the age of 16, I was seeing ghosts and drawing portraits of them, drawing pictures of them to show my mother what they looked like. And then later, when we moved from that house that we were renting, I actually found paintings, portraits of them in a very back closet that looked exactly like the drawings I had drawn for my mother. What else? From the age of 25 until about 40, I began training with Archangel Michael in the astral realms and learning how to do battle against a much more worthy opponent, like Archangel Michael. And I can remember often that my guide, my personal spirit guide, was there with me, and he would often plead with Archangel Michael to go easier on me, let me take some breaks, let me, he was like, you're being too hard on her, you're being too rough, let her take a break, she's exhausted, blah, blah, blah. He was always pleading for me, and Michael would say, no, she's tough enough, she can keep going, and I would keep going. But Nick was constantly trying to plead with Michael to go easier on me, but I understand I needed to learn the endurance. So I get it. By the age of 27, I was doing active grid work and energy work for the ley lines of the planet, clearing the energies and the stargates and the portals to allow the new energies to come in. I was also working to clear out the chakra points of the earth by the age of 27. By the age of 30 is when I was resurrecting my firstborn when she died at the age of 10 and a half. And again, all of that is well documented. She had 11 specialists, and she was only in the hospital a total of 3 weeks, when in the first 3 days they kept telling me she wasn't even going to survive. And at best she'd be a vegetable. At the end of the 3 weeks, she had already been put in rehab and was coming home. And the psychiatrist brought me into his office with this great big stack of her file. And he's like, I've spoke to 11 specialists, and nobody wants to take claim for her miraculous recovery. Do you have anything to say about this? Because he had been spying on me. He had been sneaking around and watching me, peeking around corners and watching me, doing my healing, my energy healing on her to continue healing the bones. She was broke all down the right-hand side of her, and internal bleeding and all kinds of she was awful. She was a mess. So every single day that I was there, I was doing energy healing with her every single day. And it wasn't just a one-time thing and it was done. The one-time thing was to get her back to life. Every single day after that was getting her mended and healed. But I didn't tell him what I was doing. I just looked at him and smiled and said, I guess you need to learn to believe in the power of prayer. And I left it at that. In 2012, I saw my first black-eyed person. I had heard of black-eyed children, but I had never heard of adults that were black-eyed. So when I saw mine at 2020 Eye Care, it blew my mind. And again, I had witnesses. My husband and my brother were there. Husband at the time were there with me. They witnessed this. And it was like a total Highlander moment. I actually have a video where I talk about that too. So yeah, I was always taught to keep who I am a secret. And so I never shared it with my kids until they started having experiences with me, and I had to start kind of cluing them in. But they had all 7 of my children had their own sightings and their own symptoms of being taken, as well as showing signs of natural abilities, natural connection with their abilities. One of my children, at the age of 18, channeled and spoke with the Council of Nine and wrote down all 9 languages, which I recently did a show with Michael on Thirsty Thursdays discussing that, and I showed the languages that she wrote down. One of my kids at a young age described UFOs and a Darth Vader looking figure that came to take her for her lessons, is how she said it. And she was 5 years old. I had another child that told me that if I want to call in the UFOs, age of 4, I'm sitting in the living room meditating, and she's telling me, Mommy, if you want to call in the UFO beings, all you have to do is go sit out in the green yard and meditate like that, and they'll come. And I didn't know how she knew that. She didn't know how to articulate that she knew it either. It's just like something that popped out of the mouth of the babe, you know? Now, present day, even my youngest, who is 9, can help me part a storm or part the storm on their own if there's a storm coming and I'm not here to help them to do it. They know how to heal animals. They know how to heal plants. Like I said, the one 9-year-old, the one child at the age of 9 helped me to resurrect the 41 chickens, baby chickens, back from the dead. She witnessed me resurrect the 3 cats, the 2 dogs, and tons of plants. Several of my children can kindle the fire and call the flame to intensify it. They can help me to calm the wind. They can push the smoke to keep people safe. They know how to disperse the earthquake and the tsunami energies. So, and I don't tell you all of this to brag. I don't tell you all of this because I want to feel special. I don't need to feel special. I know what I can do. And it doesn't matter to me a bit if people believe me or not. I know what I'm capable of. And I'm completely comfortable in who I am and what I can do. I know I'm going to take care of me and my own. But my mission here is to teach you that you can do this too. To help activate your awakening. Get you to remember who you are. Because I am the beacon that leads you home to self. And we are who we've been waiting for. And once you realize that, the world as we know it is most certainly going to change. And I feel that time is very soon. Because the Great Awakening is here. It is upon us. We are in the now of it. It's not something happening in the future. It's now. It's happening now. So I want to ask you that if this speaks to you, and if it speaks to a need that you have inside of you to where you want to learn more, then I am meant to be your tutor or your guide or your mentor in some way. And I am honored to be that. If you have a physical need of healing, and anything that I have spoken calls to you in a need of healing, then I am meant to be that beacon of hope for you and to help heal you. My links will be in the description below of how to contact me for whatever your needs are, whether they are in spiritual growth or in physical healing. My ultimate goal is for all of you to know that you too can go forth and do the same great works as He. And more. And more. Just as Jesus said. Together we will change this world as we know it into something that is beautiful and safe and peaceful and plentiful. This is the Great Awakening. And I truly am the beacon that can lead you home to self. Blessings of love and light. Thank you for listening.